The Black Rose McQueen. I wanted to give a shout out to Ring IQ Boxing, and remember to tune in to the motherfucking relay.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay, where we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, I'm sure that most of you guys have heard by now. Talks have begun for what could be an undisputed heavyweight title fight between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, set to go down late this year in Saudi Arabia. But to those talks, both Deontay Wilder and Kubrat Pulev refused to step aside. To be honest, in order for this Fury versus Joshua fight to happen, those two guys, they would have to. Especially in the case of Anthony Joshua, as Kubrat Pulev is his mandatory challenger via the IBF. And in order for a Joshua versus Fury fight to be an undisputed heavyweight title fight, it's got to involve all the belts, and it can't. You end up relinquishing at least one of them as a result of non-compliance, as a result of not satisfying your mandatory challenger. It really isn't a secret that in order for a Joshua versus Fury fight to come off, instead of what was previously anticipated, both Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua would need the blessing of both Deontay Wilder and Kubrat Pulev. That fight don't happen if those two guys don't give them the green light for it to happen. A portion of the article reads, as far as we are concerned, the next fight for Deontay Wilder is the third fight with Tyson Fury. Shelley Finkel, Wilder's career-long co-manager, told BoxingScene.com, unless we are told different, those are the only plans we have for Deontay's next fight. As mentioned in the ESPN.com story, a Fury versus Joshua fight would require step-aside fees to be issued to Wilder as well as Kubrat Pulev, the long-time mandatory challenger in waiting. That clause was covered very well. Ivailo Gatsev, CEO of Epic Sports, Pulev's co-promoter along with Top Rank, confirmed to BoxingScene.com. There's no way out. Even though Joshua keeps looking for ways to avoid us, we have exercised our right to fight for the title we've been waiting for years. We understand that a fight with Fury and Joshua is big for the United Kingdom. The last we checked, we do not all live under a newly established British Empire. Let's just all do the right thing and move forward with the fights we have in writing. After Anthony Joshua loses to Kubrat, he can go fight whoever he wants. It's funny hearing Gatsev, CEO of Epic Sports, try to paint this picture to where Anthony Joshua is trying to find new ways to avoid Kubrat Pulev. I mean, right. Where do you get that from, alright? 2017. Pulled out. Kubrat Pulev was supposed to be fighting Anthony Joshua. It was Kubrat Pulev that ended up pulling out of the fight. He got injured. He hurt his shoulder, whatever it was. But anyway you slice it, it's got less to do with Anthony Joshua and more to do with Kubrat Pulev. He had to reposition himself for a title shot via the IBF, and he did that when he fought Hughie Fury in 2018. He has been waiting ever since, but hey, you lost your spot in the line, okay? That's your fault. That has more to do with you and less to do with them. I hear these words from Ivailo Gatsev. Yeah. And Anthony Joshua is trying to find new ways to avoid you.
When did that happen?
There's such a thing as banter, and there's such a thing as bollocks. In this situation, this has more to do with bollocks than it does to do with banter.
But as stated, an undisputed heavyweight title fight between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury won't be an undisputed title fight if Anthony Joshua ends up relinquishing one of his belts to Kubrat Pulev. Thus, satisfying Pulev or getting his blessing is paramount, necessary. And you see what Ivailo Gatsev is saying. You know, they want that fight, they want that opportunity. It's the funniest thing because, given the COVID-19 pandemic, how it's affecting boxing, how it's brought all the wheels and all the gears in the sport to a screeching halt, I actually think it's possible to petition the IBF for an exception to the mandatory to see a unification fight get made. That is one avenue of opportunity that Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua could peruse to try to get around Kubrat Pulev so that they can have that Fury fight sooner than later. But
why would they?
The problem there is the Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua undisputed heavyweight title fight is a historic fight. I mean, when has the undisputed heavyweight championship ever been contested between two Brits? You understand?
Think about it.
For the United Kingdom and their boxing scene, their boxing fans, this is a historic fight. This ain't your run-of-the-mill title fight, okay? This is a milestone in British boxing history. And given what's going on with the COVID-19 pandemic, the fact that even once boxing resumes, these still won't be ideal conditions to stage a fight of that magnitude. So, even if you could circumvent Kubrat Pulev, get around that guy so that you get that Tyson Fury fight sooner than later, at this point in the juncture, do you really want to? I mean, essentially, that's what I'm communicating, that even if you could get around that guy, now is not the right time for the Fury fight, because the Fury fight is a historic fight. It's a fight that, once things go back to normal, is almost a guarantee to draw a rather large crowd, whether the fight's over there in the shores of the United Kingdom or elsewhere in the world in Saudi Arabia. Once travel resumes, you can bet your bottom dollar there's going to be a lot of Brits boarding a lot of planes to be able to see that fight. That being said, now is not the most opportune time to start hashing that thing out. It's just not. There's a possibility that Anthony Joshua, his very next fight, could end up fighting behind closed doors. You know, that they want to get this guy out there at least once this year.
You talk about the big shows going behind closed doors. You wouldn't put Joshua behind closed doors, would you?
If we have to, I would. I don't want to. I don't want to do that behind closed doors. So I want to give ourselves every opportunity to stage AJ in front of a crowd. Now, we have to probably bite the bullet and say he's only going to box once this year. So if that's the case, we're okay to go in September or October, or, you know, don't really want to go much further than that. He hasn't boxed nearly for a year since then. But if we can't, so my preference is AJ with a crowd in the UK. My next preference is AJ in another country with a crowd. And my last result is AJ behind closed doors.
So it's a possibility.
It is, if it has to be. I'm not gonna hold his career up to a point where he hasn't boxed in a year. It'd be ridiculous. So we've got to do what we've got to do.
You think about that Anthony Joshua's very next fight, it could very well be behind closed doors, in spite of Eddie Hearn's best wishes, that if we can only get this guy out once this whole year, and it'll have to be behind closed doors, if it comes to that, it's something that might happen.
Right.
And if this is a genuine possibility for the near future, you don't want the Fury fight to be the fight that happens behind closed doors. You'd want the Pulev fight to be the fight that happens behind closed doors. That if you have to make that sacrifice, better Pulev than Fury. So in all likelihood, these preliminary talks that we're hearing about a Joshua versus Fury fight being the next fight, they likely won't materialize into anything. It's counterintuitive, counterproductive. It would make no sense. What I'm thinking these talks are is they're extending the olive branch for the conversation to happen.
Baby steps.
That okay, this is an eventuality. We might as well address it here and now because we have time to address it here and now. But as far as that being the very next fight, no, I don't see that happening. I don't think that's very likely at all.
You're Anthony Joshua and you might only get to fight once the whole fucking year.
Why would it be the Tyson Fury fight? That doesn't make any sense. Given the size and scale of that fight, the ideal scenario is that if you can only fight once this whole year, and it might end up being behind closed doors. It might. Well, you wouldn't do that with Tyson Fury. That doesn't make any fucking sense. So in all likelihood, the proposed itinerary before COVID-19 hit and shut everything down, that proposed itinerary, that pecking order, that itemized list, in all likelihood, will proceed with some alterations, of course, as planned. The Joshua's next fight, in all likelihood, will be Kubrat Pulev. And Tyson Fury's next fight will be Deontay Wilder. It's the way it's looking. In reference to that pecking order, Anthony Joshua himself says, I'm going to walk through Pulev. He's not on my level.
Hey, don't go overlooking that guy.
It's in a way overlooking Pulev, but I've got to look through Pulev because I'm going to walk through Pulev. Joshua said in reference to his IBF mandatory challenger and upcoming opponent. That's the mindset. I've got to walk through him. When it comes to Pulev, it's not on my level. I want the boys at the top. I ain't worried about the boys, around me. I'm walking through them all. And that's the mindset that we have to have as fighters. So I'm looking at Tyson Fury like I'm going to walk through him as well. Because I had my issue last year, I got through it and I want to correct it. And I told you, like, people don't know what that does to a fighter mentally when he loses in front of the world and what it takes to come back. And you know, having this time to reflect has been a blessing in disguise. It's been a blessing in disguise, so we'll see what the future holds. And when Fury and Wilder is ready, I'll tell you this, I will not turn down that offer.
England's Tyson Fury, WBC champion, and Alabama's Deontay Wilder are tentatively scheduled to fight October 3rd at an undetermined venue.
The only reason is because of that Ruiz fight. Joshua said regarding why he is listed as an underdog against Fury. That's the only reason. And that's why I'm ready to redeem and put trust back into my stable. I get it, you know. After I went through what I went through and made no excuses, it must have seemed that Ruiz beat the better man that night, you know. So I didn't make no excuses. So Ruiz must have believed that. Yeah, that night, I beat the best Anthony Joshua. And that's cool to think that, but I'm working. It's such a shame that I'm in quarantine right now because it's put a halt to greatness. But this is a part of history. But I'm working toward beating Tyson Fury. Whether the bookmakers or non-believers or the doubters want to be with me or not, I have to believe it. I'm working towards beating Tyson Fury.
I want you all up there to pay special attention to what Anthony Joshua said in reference to the mindset of Andy Ruiz post-fight after their first engagement, after their first outing. You will notice that Anthony Joshua highlighted that in Ruiz's mind, he may have felt that he beat the best version of Anthony Joshua that night. A gross oversight. Throughout widespread rumors and speculation, something was wrong with Anthony Joshua ahead of that fight. No light was given to this by Anthony Joshua's detractors. No light was given to this by Andy Ruiz himself. In their minds, Andy Ruiz had beaten the best version of Anthony Joshua. But that was not the case, was it? As in the second fight, we'll notice that Andy Ruiz could do little more with Anthony Joshua except stay on the receiving end of his left hand. One must then reconcile. How is it that the same Andy Ruiz that floored Anthony Joshua 4 times in their first outing is the same Andy Ruiz
couldn't do nothing with Anthony Joshua but get his head jabbed off by him in the second fight? How is it that this is possible? If Anthony Joshua is every bit the hyped up hype job that people think he is, then how could he recover from a beating like that? You know, when Tony Thompson did what he did to David Price the first time, they had a second fight, and the second fight worked out exactly like the first fight did. David Price got chinned, David Price got floored. When Isaac Dogbe, the then WBO Super Bantamweight champion, lost that title the hands of Emmanuel Navarrete, it was a one-sided affair. It really was a one-sided beating. Isaac did his best, but he lost that fight. He goes into a subsequent immediate rematch, and he loses the rematch in worse fashion, and he lost the first fight. I don't highlight these two particular fighters to slight them or their abilities so much as to characterize that immediate rematches, they don't work out for everybody. So if Anthony Joshua were as bad as people say he is, if he were as hyped up as people say he is, one would think that his second outing with an Andy Ruiz would have worked out the way that those outings went for those fighters when they had immediate rematches. But that was not the case. You think about Alberto Machado and his 2 outings with Andrew Cancio. Andrew beat him the first time in an upset, and he beat him the second time in even worse fashion. Alberto was not able to make the adjustments to come back and be a better fighter for a second outing with Andrew Cancio, whereas with Anthony Joshua, we can say that not only did Anthony Joshua make the adjustments, but he won in one-sided fashion. He completely neutralized and took away Andy Ruiz's best weapons. So I reiterate, I will ask again, Anthony Joshua were every bit the hyped up hype job that everybody thinks he is, the guy who they picked to lose the rematch. If he were all these things, why'd he prove you wrong and why'd he get his belts back? I'll tell you why. Because you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So you shouldn't even be talking. It's the truth. Ahead of the first fight, there were a lot of people who had a lot of things to say. A lot of things to say about Anthony Joshua, a lot of things to say about his opponent choice, making no light of the fact that this was a short notice stand-in opponent who was standing in for Jarrell Miller. You know, these were not ideal conditions at this time. An offer was made to the likes of an Adam Kalnaki, who turned the fight down. An offer was made to the likes of Luis Ortiz, who also, so many words, turned the fight down, okay? It's not like Anthony Joshua set out to fight Andy Ruiz. This was a short notice opponent in what were extenuating circumstances. And all I heard from the usual suspects is how this was such a poor opponent choice. And where'd they pull this fat guy out of? Anybody who knew anything about Andy Ruiz, the fighter, knew that he's actually quite formidable at the right range. That mid-range to inside, this guy is lethal. I said as much on Dan the Man's podcast leading up to the fight. Anthony Joshua, he's got to be careful with this guy.
You know what the shit about the Ruiz fight is, and I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it. I know motherfuckers probably wouldn't want to believe it coming from me, but Ruiz is dangerous. Ruiz is a short heavyweight that Joshua has to punch down to hit. Ruiz could slip the shot, end up mid-range to inside, and if he gets there, Joshua is in fucking trouble.
But look, Dan, the question is, does he have enough power to hurt? Does Andy Ruiz, does he carry enough power to hurt?
Yeah, man, I'm telling you, man, that little flesh ball. Hey, look, let me tell you something.
Listen to me.
Joseph
Parker gave Andy Ruiz more respect than he gave Anthony Joshua. Watch the fight. Joseph Parker gave Andy Ruiz's punch more respect than he gave Anthony Joshua's. The kid can punch. That's what I'm telling. I know motherfuckers ain't gonna want to believe it coming from me. They're gonna think I'm trying to sell a fight.
Ahead of the fight, as an avenue to belittle Anthony Joshua for his opponent choice in what were extenuating circumstances, there were those out there that called Andy Ruiz a cherry, a guy who didn't stand a chance. This guy doesn't have a shot in the dark. That's what they were saying before the fight. They were wrong. In the subsequent rematch, those same individuals told you that Anthony Joshua, oh, forget it, this guy's finished. His career is over. He doesn't stand a chance. Once again, they were wrong. Ahead of the first fight, I told you that Andy Ruiz, you gotta be careful with the guy.
I told you.
Don't let this portly fellow's unassuming demeanor fool you into thinking you can be asleep at the wheel with him. You can't. I didn't forecast Andy's victory, I didn't. But I did tell you this guy's dangerous, and he showed you what I was talking about. Ahead of the second fight, and I'll leave the link to that prediction video in the description box, I told you what Anthony Joshua was going to do, and I told you how he was going to do it, and that's how he went out there and did it. So believe me when I tell you that the bookies and how they've got the Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury fight, that they've got Anthony Joshua as a bit of an underdog. Believe me when I tell you that that's no insight into what will happen. How the bookies have a fight and how a fight works out are two entirely different things. And Anthony Joshua is every bit the competitor that he says he is. Because if he wasn't, he would have never got his fucking belts back. When you fucking guys thought his career was over, when you thought he was this era's David Price, what did he do? He proved you wrong. You better learn from your fucking mistake.